Hey guys, what's up? It's PkmariO, and today I wanted to talk about a specific kind of cassette tapes. Specifically, this kind right here. So, a couple of weeks back, I went to this one record store. I believe it was in Milton, Milton, Ontario, Canada. Um, and uh, and so there I bought several records. I bought a couple of cassette tapes. But then also they had a box of 10-minute cassette tapes for free. Now, of course, anything free is good, supposedly anyway. As you'll soon find out, this may not always be the case. I was willing to try out these cassette tapes because, I mean, you literally have nothing to lose when they're that much. And whatever this brand is, I don't even really know. It's kind of hard to tell with this font. Like, if you can read that font, then please tell me in the comments what it actually says. But anyway, um, whatever this brand is, I decided to test it out. Mainly because I wanted to get 10-minute cassette tapes, so that way I could sort of make my own custom single versions of certain songs. Mainly that of Just Good Friends by Michael Jackson, because that song was never released as a single, so I thought it would be pretty cool to have my own custom cassette single of the song, seeing as how cassette singles were fairly common in the 80s. However, little did I know what I would be in store for, because these cassette tapes are bad. And when I say bad, I mean really, really bad. Um, I think that has to do with the fact that they are really cheap. To put into perspective, here is a Maxell cassette tape. Maxells are probably the best ones you can find. They're actually still being produced to this very day, and even though they're probably not the best cassettes you can find, they're of good enough quality considering how common they are. If you really just want to get into cassette tapes and you're looking for ones that are easy to find, um, if you're looking for ones that are easy to find and of good quality, then I'd go with Maxell. Um, but then, aside from Maxell, other tapes that are pretty common to find are a whole bunch of brands that you might not even recognize. Then there's brands such as Sony, TDK, so on and so forth, that no longer produce cassette tapes. Because, I mean, yeah, cassettes are making a comeback, but it's a fairly niche market, to say the least. Um, but anyway, you're probably wondering how bad one of these cassette tapes are. And to that, I will actually show you. Because, and this happened by complete accident, when I was recording Bang a Gong by T Rex onto this 10-minute cassette tape, about 40 or so seconds into the song, I start hearing a crinkling sound coming from the tape deck, and normally that's not a good sign. Because in a cassette player that you're using on the go, that probably means that it's eating the tape. And in the case of mine actually doesn't eat tapes. What's really cool about my cassette player, I'm not sure if you can really see the brand name there, but yeah, what's really cool about my cassette player is that it actually cuts power to the deck before it gets the opportunity to eat the tape. I remember one time I was listening to a mixtape that I had made. It had several songs from different genres on it, and I was listening to this one Beastie Boys song. And partway through that song, I think it was around the quiet part, all of a sudden the tape stops. The counter on the little LED display next to the tape decks, or rather in between the decks, was displaying random digits. And I pulled the tape out of the cassette player, and there was just a little bit poking out of out of the hole furthest to the right on the shell. and essentially what it had done was it prevented that tape from being eaten. So yeah, I know for certain that my cassette player does not eat tapes, but in this case I would chalk it down to the fact that this isn't a very good brand of cassettes. It instead chewed up the tape, probably because it wasn't very good to begin with. And that actually wasn't the first incident that I had with this cassette. Side A turned out fine, but side B, when I played it back, there was quite a bit of noise dropouts. There were also some instruments in the recording that weren't even present when I actually played it back, such as little trumpets in the background. But by far, this recording of Bang a Gong by T-Rex is probably the biggest offender. So in order to show you how bad the quality of this tape is, I'm going to first have it play on this Maxell tape. The song is also known as Get It On, and then I'm going to play it on this tape. So without further ado, let's get into the Maxell tape. Oh, and by the way, I used my Sony cassette player for this. But yeah, let's get into the Maxell tape. Alright, so that's what the song is normally supposed to sound like. Now let's try whatever no-name tape this is supposed to be. Now be prepared to listen to something, folks. Pretty bad, am I right? But yeah, that was whatever brand name this is. So essentially after this, I came up with a couple of rules as to what you should be looking for when buying blank cassette tapes. So first of all, if it's a brand that you don't recognize, I'm pretty sure even if this were to be a legible font, then even then that probably wouldn't really help its case, because I'm sure there's many crappy brands out there that have much more legible fonts for their logos. But anyway, if it's a brand name that you don't even recognize, then don't even bother. I'd say you should stick to Maxell, Sony, TDK. Those are the top three. And if anything, I'd even make a case for Fuji and BASF. But aside from those, I don't know. I haven't really tried many other brands of cassettes. Philips is adequate at best. I'd recommend you don't really. I'd recommend that you avoid those. And of course, speaking of the font, that's another thing you should keep in mind. Because one thing all of these brands that I've just mentioned have in common is that, well, look at this font. You can read that. It says Maxell. It says Sony right there. You can probably clearly read that. TDK, Fuji, and BASF. So yeah, those are the ones that I'd recommend you actually get. Some are better than others, like I'd say Maxell are probably by far the best ones you can find. But Yeah, the one thing they all have in common, if you couldn't already tell, is that they all have a legible font that you can read. And I'm guessing the reason why a lot of these crappier brands use less legible fonts is because they want to hide how bad their cassettes are. They just want you to pick them up by chance. Another indication is if the owner is just giving them away. Normally, cassettes are supposed to cost anywhere from $1 to maybe $4 or $5, depending on who you get it from. I'd say a pretty reasonable price to pay for a cassette is around $1 for a brand new blank one, and roughly and I'd say anywhere from $1 to maybe $15 is reasonable for a pre-recorded tape, like most of the ones in there, most of them. Um, Anything more than that, yeah, that's a bit more unreasonable, but it really all depends on the tape. But if in the case they're giving these tapes away for free, like the people working at that Milton record store were, that's probably a sign that they're not very good, and the people there are just trying to get rid of them. I mean, hey, if you want to experiment with them, or if you need something, like for example, if your cassette shell is broken, or you need a new case, which is actually common with a lot of the older cassette tapes. I've actually had to replace the case of quite a few of those tapes there. Um, but I mean, if you wanted a case replacement, if you wanted a shell replacement, if you wanted to experiment with them, set them on fire, run them over with your car, even just record whatever on them to see how bad your tape deck records on them, then go ahead, knock yourself out. But if you plan on using them for anything actually serious, then stay away from them. Also, another thing that I'd like to point out is how cheap the packaging is. Like, for example, this is just a plain box, and the only writing on here is, well, from the record store and from myself. Whereas something like Maxell, as you can see right there, those are in good looking boxes. You can tell that they actually spent some money on the packaging. And even just the packaging for the tapes themselves. Like, I've taken most of these blank tapes out of their packages, but they have had at least some effort. There's been at least some effort put into making them look presentable. Um, and of course, as you can see, this Maxell tape here, it's nice and smooth packaging. And there's this little tab here that allows you to rip it open. It doesn't feel cheap. It feels as though they actually spent money on this shrink wrap. But with this, it's just cheap, clear shrink wrap with some little gold thing here that's nearly impossible to rip at. Okay, maybe it's not that hard. But yeah, I think that really serves as a testament to what blank cassette tapes you should buy and which ones you should stay away from. So, long story short, stick with cassette tapes where you can read the brand name, where you can recognize the brand name as any one of the ones that I've pointed out in this video, and most importantly, stick with the ones that actually look as though there was some money put into them, rather than being cheap packaging. Like, look at this. This is embarrassing.